Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Today we're going to talk to a midwife, not any old midwife, the whistleblowing midwife. Now you may know if you've had a child that it isn't always plain sailing with the NHS, public enemy number one. You may think that it's quite easy. You go in, have a baby and there it is. But there's a lot of shenanigans going on in this health service that we have all been mandated to pay part of our income to keep going, which is a bit odd. Anyway, so we're going to talk to Victoria Rixon, who is the whistleblowing midwife, who has quite an amazing story to tell. Victoria, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you with me.
Thank you very much. I'm honoured.
It is a pleasure to have you. And midwifery, I have had a midwife on the show about a year ago it was either New Zealand or Australia, who had some very frightening things to say about the whole process. And funnily enough, in my book, he says, giving it a quick plug, it's not yet ready, there is a bit about midwifery in home births, in which it talks about the umbilical, not the umbilical, yeah, the umbilical cord, not the umbilical, when the umbilical cord being cut, the placenta and all of that, which we know a lot of shenanigans has gone on with to do with the name and crown corporations getting involved. But let's not get into that. But the whole process of having a baby, which in theory should be a wonderful experience for the family or for the mums and dads, particularly for the woman who's having it, and has turned into a bit of a screaming nightmare from all accounts. Now, you're an ex-NHS midwife. You've handed back your registration. You said to me just now you don't want anything to do with them. Tell us then, before we go into your story, when you were working for them, what was the sort of normal process that the NHS would offer in terms of a woman having a baby?
Yeah, so good question. The hospital offers all of your care. So the NHS, when you're pregnant, is the only place that they believe you should go. So women don't realize they've got an alternative choice of doula or a birth keeper or a private midwife. Most people know that the NHS is the only place to go to give birth, which includes the hospital setting. In some instances, a midwifery-led care unit where there's no doctors attached to the building. So that was kind of like really, to be honest, Richard, I'd had three children before I became a midwife, so I knew what it was like to birth outside of the system. And then becoming a midwife, I realized the indoctrination and the policy led and, all the Saving Babies' Lives care bundles, all these, evidence based, they slam on top of birth, just made it so medicalized that, you forget that actually having a baby is not, it's the most natural. Without women birthing, we wouldn't repopulate, we wouldn't have generations. So it was quite astonishing when I went into the profession, having had a 30, I was 31 or 32 by the time I got into midwifery. By that time, it was, I'd had a long, extensive career in employment in the normal real world. And you go into that, and I was really quite sickened by the oppression. And I think it's only since leaving have I recognized how bad it is that women don't have a voice, they don't have a choice, they don't have the ability to be free or free choice or free thinking. From an early age, they've been indoctrinated to live in a cell in your house, away from your family and your siblings in a bedroom. So when you start your period, you hide it. You don't talk about it with your group of friends. Like, when I was growing up, you didn't talk about periods. So as we've got older, we talk about those things, but they would have been a collective village, the red tent, whatever you wanted to call it. They would have celebrated a woman that had her menstrual cycle. So if we're starting with young girls there, can you imagine by the time they get into birth, they're just not prepared, and they hand over all their consent as soon as they're pregnant. Here, take my consent, take my permission, and now tell me what to do. And out pops a baby with a lot of trauma.
And I mean, I know from when Julia had her last baby, it was a horrific experience because she went in because she was a bit concerned. And then they said, we're going to hold you in and we're going to give you a cesarean and zip it out. Just like that. And she felt that that was all beyond her control. And her consent, as you say, had been taken away. And it does seem that they are favouring these unzippings of the stomach and pulling the baby out, rather than giving women a chance to experience a natural birth, or even being told or influenced that having a natural birth is an extremely painful thing. So we know that we know that the NHS is in a terrible state. So what did you start to do then when you felt this feeling that this isn't right?
Well, I say this a lot. It's so multifaceted. You couldn't figure it out. You'd have to really sit down and think about it. It's perfectly planned systemically in every area that you can't piece, oh, it's this one area. For instance, if you were giving a drug after cesarean sections and all of a sudden everybody that had a cesarean section were bleeding, you might know that it might be the drug. So you can easily fix the problem and go to the root cause. When you're thinking about psychology, sociology, demographics, immigration, you're talking about age, you're talking about weight, you're talking about family history, you couldn't figure it out if you tried. It's so systemically embedded on purpose, a bit like working out about the Crown Corporation. It takes you a long time to work through all of that, the same as the judicial system. So in midwifery, for me, it was working out that I had a real epiphany one day during COVID. It was so disgustingly busy, and I'm not a flapper. I'm quite calm. I'm quite clear. My delay reaction comes out 3 or 4 days later, and I'll just start bawling my eyes out. So at the time, I can get on with the job in hand. And I can remember this particular day, I had the most high risk patients. They were so ill. Like one lady, they thought she was going to die. Like she had a horrendous disease that they didn't know what it was. Then I had a lady that had diabetes and she was really sick with kidney failure. Then I had preterms, I had women bleeding. And my manager, who was an absolute numbnut, comes out the office, middle management, got no understanding of people skills, no eye contact, and says, have you checked the fridge temps today? You haven't done the fridge temperature. So, Richard, what used to really profoundly bug me more than anything is that there's checklists for everything, but there is no checklist for women. So, how many women did you help breastfeed today? I can't write that down. How many women did you hold in her labour space? Can't write that down. But as long as I've done the fridge temp and the drug temperature, and I've checked that the floors aren't wet, and I've done all the health and safety and all the, there's no time to be a midwife because the system doesn't allow you to be a midwife. So I always said for quite a long time, I'm either some sort of obstetric nurse or I'm just a facilitator to give out drugs and some information. But actually, to the crux of midwifery, and I know I talked to Julia about this when we were away, it's holding that space for that woman to make her choice. That's just not possible in that. It's not impossible in that environment, not at all. And that was why I went. So I kept raising little concerns here, there, became a union rep. So I was trying to get into it. But I realized that the Royal College of Midwives, shout out to the worst union in the world, that are probably one of the richest in the world, rob all the midwives' money, never support them through any proceedings, a bit like the GMC. I went from them to GMB to try and see if this was a midwifery systemic problem. In fact, it was the whole NHS. And I thought, I'm out. I knew it wasn't long after that I was gone. But raising it at your manager's level wasn't enough for me. I'm bolshy, so I knocked at the CEO's door. You get paid 300 grand a year. What are you going to do about it? Sat with her, nothing changed. A year, not even a year, and 2 months later, I was gone.
So do they just sit there and go through the motions and sort of go, oh, that's, I hear your concern. That's terrible, Victoria.
Oh, what could we do? What do you mean that we are inducing half of the population now that are pregnant? So we've got 600,000 births. It's dropped now, but if you've got 600,000 births on average, you're inducing 300,000 of them. You are using your force in a way to stick your fingers inside a woman's body, 300,000 women, and force out their baby and force their waters to be broken. That's criminal. 12, my son's 24 this year. 23 years ago, not even one of the women in my group had a cesarean section. It was about 7 to 12%, if I remember rightly. We're now at 42% in 20 years. Why? Because it costs them more money, more bed space, more drugs, no care about the mum and baby.
Which is outrageous. So you started to talk about it then, and that started to bring, certain notoriety to you. People started to notice, hang on, what's this woman saying?
Yeah, so during COVID, the NHS England put a model on top of our desperate situation. So not only had all the staff left to go and isolate, you then had staff leaving to go and vaccinate because they got paid more money to vaccinate. Remember, that's how they got rid of.
Mm,
That's how they depleted the staff. So what it looked like to the general public that we were busy because of COVID, but actually they made all these slices which then shortened our staffing on, and then they plonked a new model on top of how we were working, so we all had to learn how to work in a completely different way in the middle of COVID. So it looked like the model didn't work, which is what they wanted, so we never worked that way again, and ruined the name continuity, which is what women want, and blamed it on COVID. It was during that I actually handed my notice in 21 and said I'm out. Babies had died in community and the parents didn't know. So I did that. Then I went to NHS England and I was like banging on their door saying, "What are you doing? This is against employment rights." And then after that, once I'd worked my last shift, Richard, which was on the 7th of February, one of the ladies that I met came in that morning and laboured behind a curtain for 10 hours on her own.
oh my God.
And that shift that night, I was gone. I handed my notice in the next morning. I went back on the Wednesday, the 9th, to see her because her baby was born in very bad condition and needed full neonatal resuscitation. It was awful. And the baby went to the intensive care unit. And I went in and I said to her, I'm leaving. I'm going to give you my number and I'll be in touch. Can we talk about this? Because I didn't want her going away and thinking she'd done anything wrong because she hadn't.
Mm,
She'd just
mm.
come into the hospital where we told her to come in, but it was so short staffed and so badly run that there was no way she was going to receive that care. And in my eyes, that's gross negligence, that's manslaughter, that's criminal harm. So that was the email I wrote when I left to all the MPs, Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak. It was very short. I'm not leaving because I'm not resilient. This is criminal harm, manslaughter, and malpractice. It's horrific. And I left, and that was it. I never went back.
And before we get on to find out what happened and the interesting phone call that you had, what was your colleagues? Were they feeling the same? Were they blissfully ignorant? Or did they just go along with it? Didn't they care? What about the other members of staff?
Yeah, Richard, it's probably the same for everybody. They've got, most people are indoctrinated and asleep. They're just doing their job. They've gone through a hard degree. Like midwifery is, they say, is one of the hardest degrees to obtain next to law and veterinary. It's a hard degree to get through. It's hard hours. You're not only doing a full-time degree, you're doing a full-time job alongside it for mere on pittance. So to think about where they are, they're just proud to be midwives. They're proud to do that job. Whereas the longer it went on for me, the more I woke up. But I went into a bit of depression to start with of the what is happening? Why is this happening? Then I started to really wake up with the COVID jabs. So my colleagues now won't speak to me because that's what midwifery does. It ostracizes you when you go. But I know that I did this. And in my exit interview and in my email to the CEO, I wrote, whatever I do next is for my colleagues and the women. I don't care who hates me. I'll just go and do it. So my colleagues are not at fault. They probably think I'm crazy or, but they haven't walked my walk and learnt what I've learnt. They are
Mm.
in their own lane, and that is absolutely fine.
And why, just as a matter of interest, why is it such a long diploma to do the, or course to do the midwifery? And I only ask this because it seems to me that people have been helping women have babies who are grandmothers, mothers, and what have you, and seem to have managed to do it for many centuries without too much adverse effect. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't be here.
Well, Richard, let's ask the question, why do they have to make the word midwife law in itself?
Well, that's a good question.
They've made it under an order in 2001. If you want to control anything and you've got to control the word midwife, are you controlling it because you need the birth in the hospital to generate the birth certificate and generate the birth notification because the birth notification goes off to the treasurer for your corporation? Is that really why this is, why home birth is completely eradicated now pretty much across the country? Because if you free birth and you free birth at home, you're worth nothing to these people. They don't
Yes.
want that. So in my eyes, if you've got to make something like healthcare a degree in a profession, it's wrong in the first place. Very,
So
very wrong.
just on that note, just to clear up, because there is sort of rumours and things, and unless you actually talk to somebody in the hospital who's there when the baby comes out, what is the procedure in terms of that registration for their system? What are you told that you're supposed to do, and what happens with these certifications and stuff?
Well, years ago, you would write the birth in a birth register book, and then you would always use a system called Protos. That's what we used. Now, when the baby's born, you obviously write everything down. Time of birth, so time of fully dilated, time of head delivered, body delivered, live baby, right? Then you have to go to the computer system called Protos. And in some hospitals, they were still paper, but everything would have been digitalized, as you know, with the digital transformation, part of the UN, part of the WEF, all of that malarkey, all digitalized now across the whole NHS, right? So
Mm.
when you input that birth register, you cannot physically close down and get a hospital and an NHS number for that baby until you have inputted the placenta. It's a separate screen. So I spoke to somebody about this yesterday, and he was like, "You're the missing piece that I needed in my life." I was like, "Okay." And basically, you put all the times into the placenta. When you press submit and you submit it all, you then generate the hospital number and the NHS number. Now, before this system was in, before we had a system that I would have to print everything off. So you would get a birth register, a birth notification, and a delivery summary. The delivery summary would go in the mother's notes. The birth register would go into filing cabinets on the ward, one to the community so they knew that the lady had delivered, and one would go home with the mother, and one in the notes. The birth notification goes nowhere but in a tray off to somewhere else. So the birth notification is the birth of the placenta.
Right. So there we are. We have it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So, that's it. And that's the thing that ends up being registered elsewhere. And we all then believe.
Potentially the 151 officer in the council or the person above who is the treasurer. We know what the treasurer does, da 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 da.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so that's that's the process there. So anyway, so you left, and you wrote this email, and then you had a phone call.
I did, from a big
Tell us
bad
about
man.
that.
So I'd sent my exit interview to a lot of MPs, to the Nursing and Midwifery Council, to the CQC, to all the media, and it was 2 pages of significant harm. Talked about these two patients with consent, may I add. They both consented.
Right.
And then I left. So when I left, Richard, now the NHS don't give you anything for free. We know this. When I left, I didn't give any reason. I just said, my diabetes can't put up with this stress. I'm out. I'm done. I didn't supply a sick note, and I didn't ever speak to anybody. So they continued to pay me for 3 months because they knew that if I messed up, they could get me under employment law or potentially strike me off the register. So when I sent my exit interview, I got an email from the chief midwife, Kate Brimpworth from NHS England, just popped into my Gmail, just plonked like that. I mean, to get hold of her would be an absolute ball ache as a midwife. So isn't it interesting? She just jumps into mine, but I didn't ever email her. She didn't do anything anyway. She's crap. So I then get enticed into this MS Teams call to go to meet one of the directors. And I didn't turn up because I thought, well, I've just had my exit interview with Tina from HR, who mouth was like this. What do you want me to do with all this information? I'm thinking, you should be knowing that. You're HR. Maybe go to the police. So I didn't go to the meeting that I was invited to go to because I just thought that was a HR meeting. Because there's so many HR and departments that you can't quite work out who you're meant to speak to. That's perfectly planned as well. So when I finally did go to the meeting, this person, I was chatting to them. They were really uncomfortable in their chair. I almost felt like now they were put up to it. If I'm honest, they were put up to doing this. And they said that people go missing overnight that whistleblow.
Just say that again, slowly.
People go missing overnight that whistleblow. And he was on his chair, like uncomfortable as he said it, but he had a headphone on and his background was blurred. So I knew he was in an office with people. So they must have heard him say it. or he was because he had his background on. And I just continued the conversation as if it didn't bother me. And then I got off the phone and ignored it. But, when it sunk in, because I'm a delayed reactor, it was sickening. Like, I stopped running at night. Yeah.
People go missing who whistleblow. I mean, that's if that's not a threat, well, it is a threat, obviously. But so so you had a delayed reaction, and you stopped doing perhaps your normal things, and then after that time settled in, and no one had chucked a bomb through your window, your house hadn't set fire, or your dog hadn't been nailed to the front door or anything like that, which heaven forbid, but you hear these stories. Did you start? You obviously your confidence started to boost up, and thought, "Well, I'm not sitting here just allowing this to stay put."
Well, at that point, Richard, I was probably already quite wobbled because at the end of March, a lady wrote online that I killed a baby and named the family and named the hospital and named the date and basically said that the founder of the With Women movement was responsible for the death of this baby. And when I got tagged in it and I saw it, I was absolutely devastated. So not only did I have that to deal with, about a
And
month.
did you remember the situation? And was it a real
Yes.
situation?
Yes, yeah. It's been to coroners. And I did look after the family very, very briefly, which is now what I've got a high court case for defamation. So I'd had that in the March, and then in the April, two very idiotic midwives then wrote the same statement on their own platforms that I'd killed this baby. So I was like, so I'd written to the NMC, and I was like, I remember I was still in employment at this time, so they had a duty to protect me and protect the claims. Although my employer was actually great, they said I'm an exemplary midwife and a colleague, and I was valued, and I should just ignore it because it wasn't true. But that had knocked me, and then I didn't eat. I was sobbing, and then in the July, I think it was around about the. I want to say it was about. I was so distraught over that time, Richard. I can't actually tell you when that MS Teams
Mm.
call was because I was so distraught over that period. And then I had, maybe 6, 7 months where I just went away and did some real good healing and grounding and finding my feet again. And then I bounced back, and boy, there was that Leo, as we were talking about earlier, that lion.
So, you must, in the course of your career as a midwife for the NHS, I mean, had that awful situation where a baby is born still, and you have to deal with the parents, and you have to deal with the situation, and presumably, I suppose you don't have a huge amount of time to get emotionally involved with these people, but this is something that is not an unusual thing, sadly, especially with the NHS and the way they do things, presumably. So when you hear that, I mean, you knew the case and you thought, well, I've done my very best, as I'm sure you would have done, like with any of the others. I'm just trying to think what I'm really asking now. I suppose I'm trying to sort of say that these things happen, and on each case, how did you cope with those sort of events? Or how did the NHS allow you to cope with those sort of events? I think would be more interesting.
Hmm. It's a part of the job that you can't learn until it happens. So you can have
Mm.
you don't really have much bereavement training at uni or psychological training to help women through that. You just learn it in a practical sense because people are real, aren't they? They're living. So you
Mm.
have to go in that situation. I actually looked after a lot of the bereaved families because I'm a little bit older. I'm good at communicating. So a lot of people don't like doing it, and that's absolutely fine. It the system isn't set up to support women in those situations at all. There's no support mentally after for mums or dads or children at all. And what's awful, Richard, is all of the women at this hospital that I worked at were delivering their babies asleep with live babies crying in the rooms next door. It was so mentally wrong. These women could hear a crying baby when their little baby's just been born. It's not awake. It's asleep. It's gone. It's awful. So I think when you start I remember a lot. I've got a lot of little traumas that I'll hear. I remember certain things. I can hear little cries. You'll never, ever, ever get over the scream of a mother that has lost her baby. It's
No.
so innate. It's so deep within her soul. It's horrendous. So, I've never lost a mum or baby in labor in any of my practice. That's never happened to me. Um, so to be told that online was really quite damaging. And for a little while, I actually doubted myself and thought, have I? You kind of then go, have I been traumatized and maybe I haven't realized, or did somebody lie about me somewhere? It was really, really traumatic. So, and I felt I'd given that family great care and support in COVID, which was really difficult. But it's everybody's perception. Their perception is warranted or how they feel. But something I really wanted to highlight through this case, which I said to the solicitor, is we were all wearing masks. We all have similar hair color. We all wear glasses. We've all got the same uniform on. You couldn't tell the difference from one doctor or nurse to the next with all of
Mm.
these uniforms and masks on. So, yeah, really quite distressing. But there is no training. You don't get a phone call after saying, "Are you okay after today?" You don't get anything at all.
No.
So you're left to just go home and, if you're already a healer or you know how to ground yourself, great, but many people don't know how to do that.
Yeah. No. That's really sad. That's really sad that goes on. So let's pick up then. You decided to take a case to court. How do we get from you've lost your job? You're being now accused of killing a baby, defamation. So where does the story take us here now, Victoria?
So I've got the defamation case, which I held off for 11 months. I didn't want to drag anybody through that horrendous court case when you've got a baby loss in the middle of it. It shouldn't happen. So it took me a long, long time. And actually, for a long time, it went away. But because I reopened my new X account in my campaign name now, the Uncensored Midwife, it reared its ugly head. And it didn't just do it once, it was horrific. I was getting people saying they were going to come and find me. It was so
Oh
bad. So
God.
so I thought, right, I've got to nip this in the bud, because if I do campaign on and I don't deal with this, it's never going to go away. So I had to address it. So we're just waiting for the High Court date for defamation on that situation. And then in the other breath, I've got a case against the council for, a one missed payment of 61.25 because I didn't have any money after leaving my job because I was unemployed. And then I find out that my work car that I had through the NHS, which was just a variation of contract change on my under the employer of the NHS hospital, there was no credit agreement. It wasn't a credit score or anything like that. They handed my data to an independent company called Act Credit Management in Leeds, and they harassed me. So I then started digging into the DSAR and asking for information about that. And that's the case I've just had on Friday. So I've got a case against the hospital as well with that, because that is a straight data breach, in my opinion, although that's not been heard yet. And I've got a case next week against Jacobs Enforcement for the council tax.
Oh right, yes. Good
For
old
harassment.
Jacobs. So in what way are they harassing you?
Since the 22nd of May, this is just this last few weeks, I have had 9 contacts from them. It's been relentless. 9.
This is the current one that's just come around that they dropped in March, the council tax, in which they, you're not supposed to start paying until April, and actually the term is until next year anyway. So why is anyone paying until the end of the service?
Exactly. So basically, when I left, I missed one payment. They sent me to get a summons. I made a payment arrangement at that time because I wasn't as clued up as I was now.
Right.
But I missed that payment, which was then £91 because they put fees on top. They sent me to court for £91.25p, so they say, to get the summons, the liability order. Jacobs then started enforcing £601, but the liability order was for 645. So I'm thinking, well, you can't just change a liability order. What is the amount? So I'm playing dumb here as if I know that the liability order is factual. Okay.
Yeah. Which we all know, by
It's
the
not.
way. If you don't, it isn't a thing.
So then what was really strange, the council sent me a revised bill because I'm now longer not working and I'm on benefits. And because it went down by half, the enforcement agents were still enforcing the bigger amount. So I
Right.
then sent to the court, to the companies, the council, and to Jacobs, an email copying them both in, saying, "Do you not communicate? Which amount is it? You've got 645, 601, and now 288." And Jacobs sent me a revised liability order of enforcement on an actual form for the 12th of September and backdated it because we're now in November and put the new amount on it. So they were continuing to enforce the debt without following due process, without making sure the amount was right. And I don't know if you saw that video I put up with that bailiff guy that came to my door. I filmed him.
Oh no, I haven't seen that. That sounds like a wicked film to watch.
Joseph Hare came to my door, and I actually showed him the court papers. I had a live claim in the court for £8,000 for harassment and breach of GDPR. And when I told him that there was ongoing civil proceedings, he didn't care. So he took photos of my house and me and took photos of the cars on the street. So since then, I then had a strikeout hearing against Jacobs on the 23rd of April, and I gave a pretty good fight that it wasn't struck out. And the judge, Skelton, has ordered that I bring my full particulars and evidence, witness, all the law. I've just finished it. It's it's good. It's very good. So I'm just about to submit it, and I've got court next week for that. So
You sound like you enjoy a bit of this.
I don't like injustice, Richard. I really don't.
Right.
Can't bear the injustice and thinking about my children having to go through this, or
Mm.
you know, elderly people who are barely eating and keeping their homes warm to have these big bully fat bailiffs at their door. So after that, I've been harassed from another bailiff called Jake Cox. He has been relentless. We're coming round now, like taunting me. So I've filmed it all. It's all on the USB for the court. And that is harassment because it has to be proportionate, which we know from Wayne Layton versus Bristow and Souter. I've
Mm.
spoken to Wayne. He was really helpful this week. So
Oh, well done. And do you think that they're hassling you because you're a woman? And they look at you as low-hanging fruit, someone easy to manipulate and frighten, and they'll get the money out of you, not knowing necessarily your backstory of how feisty you really are.
perhaps, yeah, but also I think they've been told that they didn't get a strikeout and normally they might well have done. So the fact they didn't
Right.
get a strikeout, they know they've got court coming up on the 11th. And if they're following my Twitter, or because I obviously tagged this, I didn't tag him, but people were tagging these people in, they're going to be watching my update. So if I've just won a court case on Friday, they know I'm not exactly this meek and mild
Right.
woman.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Gosh. So, wow, that's you've got a lot going on. On top of all of this, you do go and give talks.
Yes, I didn't think that was going to happen, but it did. Yes.
So, yes. I mean, what are you doing now? How are you surviving?
I've cut back, Richard. I think when you haven't got a lot, you've just got to cut back and you eat, I fast now, so I don't have as much food. I don't need to. I actually quite like it. People think you're starving yourself. It's not. I just don't eat as much. You cancel certain gym memberships, you don't get your hair done as much, or do you
No,
know what I
I
mean?
know that.
So I think it's all proportionate to where you are in your life. And the way I look at it is if I've got to restart my life somewhere at 42 years old, I've just got to go with what's being presented to me. And you cannot ignore a data breach. You are the data subject. You do not have to put up with anybody sharing your data. It's against the law, all laws, the constitutional monarchy, the law. It's not right. So having that and then obviously going to court on Friday, it's given me, because I've had 3 hearings now and I've only lost one. That was my very first one. I was learning the jargon and how they speak, and a bit like Mick Butler. He said he
Mm.
got loads wrong before, and he that has resonated in my mind. God, what I did at the beginning, now it's just tight, and you get very good at it, and you learn everything, and you learn more a different law or a different process, and you just ignore their solicitors because they're just idiots and they're bullies. And I think once you get past that and you get past all the fear, you just do what is right. And what is right, Richard? To let the people have this sense of freedom and not be bullied by these people.
And getting rid of the fear, which is what holds a lot of people back, of course.
Yes. Yes.
Which frightens everybody, and then they panic, and then you make mistakes, of course,
Yes.
which we all do. And sometimes you have to go through the mistakes, don't you, to learn, as you just said with your first court case. So what about your children? How many children have you got?
4.
Four? Blimey. So they all need feeding and looking after. Do you homeschool them?
I've actually just removed my eldest has left home. My next eldest has just finished his GCSEs and he's leaving. He'll be homeschooled. And I've just removed my 13-year-old. He's homeschooled. I actually, David Edelman, the People's Lawyer, helped me put a notice together for the school. We sent a fantastic notice to the head for the breach of children's human rights, and I got banned from the school premises. I got told I needed to look at my behavior and reflect, and they might then change their mind in 3 months. Whatever.
It's like, well, I don't want to bring the kids in here. Thanks very much.
No, you're all right. Yeah.
Why would you? And hopefully more and more people are learning this stuff. Although it's not easy for people who are unable to do it. Are you? I don't want to pry too much on your personal situations, but you've got 4 kids. Have you got a partner, supportive partner?
I do. I have a husband, yes. So
Yes.
we're just all working through this big change, because when I became a midwife, you have a plan in your head, don't you? Oh,
Yeah.
now I'll be able to buy a house and we'll have more holidays. And actually, that is material. It means absolutely nothing if people are dying at the hands or being harmed in a system. So for me now on this journey, it's shaping now. So I've got a book deal. So I'm writing a book at the moment. I'm doing a little bit of talks. I'm helping people with their debts. So I'm just at the moment free flowing through it all and see where it spits me out, really.
So here's a question that I often get asked, and I'm not quite sure why they ask that of little old me. But do you feel that everything that you have done has brought you to this? I mean, obviously, everything you've done has brought you to where you are. But I mean, in terms of spiritual, as if you've been guided or pushed to do what you're doing.
Yes, and you spoke about this at Q Stoke, I remember. Yes, 100%. I never felt fully comfortable in midwifery. It never felt like I was on the right road. I almost saw stepping stones, and now I'm out of it. I'm like, oh yeah, I've tied that bit up. For whatever reason, I had to go through that little journey to get where I am
Hmm.
now. But I always have been hugely interested in injustice and human rights. I am the person that would literally, if someone was being bullied in the street, I'd be like, oh, that's enough. That's just me. I'm not a person that would walk on by. I
Hmm.
never have been. My growing up, everyone was like, oh, you're always so gobby, or I was. But as I've got older, I've learned you can have your say and have it respectfully. But this spiritual journey that I'm on, Richard, yes, I've had the most huge awakening in the last 5 years. I think so many people have. But it's about now re-educating my children down a different road so they can make their own choices for their children, my grandchildren, and how I can set our lives up in the next whatever chapter that looks like. I don't know yet, but yeah.
So do your children feel that their mum is very different from other mums?
If you ask them that, they'd probably say no, but my boys adore me. I'm really lucky. They really look up to me. They're very loving. They tell me they love me. For teenagers, they're very home. They like home. They're
Right.
free to go out. They're sat downstairs now. They're not always in their bedroom. So we spend a lot of time in the garden, or they're
Hmm.
great. But I allow my children to grow, and then they tell me when they want to talk about something. So my mum was a bit, not that she meant it, it was that generation. She wasn't always able to allow me to just fly and catch me when I fell. So for my children, I'm doing that. But obviously, I'm re-educating them all now about the NHS, about the policing, about what's right and wrong. That people, so they've been waiting for these bailiffs to turn up, and I'm like, I'll show you exactly how you deal with these people. But
So they had no fear.
no,
No.
and not in it. There's no aggression. You only communicate. You never use your
Hmm.
hands. And obviously, in this situation, they've seen that I've rang the police, and the police aren't interested, so they're learning and they're seeing. But they do say I'm pretty easygoing as a mum, and I do let them be who they want to be.
Right. Yes. absolutely. And resilient as well.
Yes, they are. They are very resilient. Yeah, my eldest is self-sufficient. Like, never asks me for anything. He's 17, bought a house.
Bought a house.
He left home at 17, he bought a house at 19, he's 23, he's bought a
Right.
house. He's really self-sufficient, independent, pops down for a screwdriver here and there, but is great. But he says to me, Mum, there's something not right in the world, and he will talk about it and he'll ask me questions and I tell him. So this is a huge education for everybody, but also my children. So if I get the CCJ it reissued against the debt collection agency for Friday, that has set a precedent. I'm going to be asking the judge to take that further. And can we take these proceedings further and now actually bring the CEO to account? You can't be hiding behind the corporation. You can't sign letters with a
Mm.
corporation name. It has to be signed by somebody. So I'm just going to keep pushing these little things.
Well, that is brilliant. I mean, because we've all got these letters from people who's just, well, it's not signed, and as you say, it's just the name of the company, which is completely irrelevant because you don't know who you're supposedly dealing with. And if they're taking a living man or woman to court, then there should be another living man who is there, not just a representative.
Yes, and I don't think it's wise to ignore anything.
No, no, quite.
I'm the opposite. I'd rather ask the question.
So I wanted to then ask you, and a question came into my head just now, and as is these things, just disappeared, which is very annoying because it was an important question. Oh yes, that's right. Going back to the children and midwifery, and well, not so much midwifery, but going on to home births. Now, when I didn't. My wife at the time did. I just stood around and made
Tea.
sandwiches and things. Yeah, made tea. Scrambled egg was one of my favourite things. We had one child in a hospital. We said never again, and the other two were at home. In fact, I just have to remember which way round it was. I think my daughter was born pretty much where I'm sitting now. Bless her. She's now in New Zealand, trying to get away from the house as much as she can. But yeah, we had two at home, and it was the most fantastic experience. I'm talking from my wife's point of view because she told me afterwards, because she didn't have the stress and all of that and everything. Of course, we did have a midwife, so presumably she wrote down on a bit of paper all those necessary things, and they're in the system. They have birth certificates and all this, or entries of a birth, this nonsense, or their placenta has, I should say, dancing about somewhere as a dead entity. But what would you now say to people who have been listening to this and have been thinking, well, I'm pregnant and I might have a baby soon, and actually I have heard stories, and perhaps with the medical intervention that everybody was told to have, that may not be a good idea to go to a hospital. There may be complications, but what would you suggest people do? Would you suggest they have them at home?
Yes, the first thing you need to do though is address any traumas that you've got, any traumas that hold back your strength and sovereignty, and it turns it into fear. If you start making decisions based on fear, you are only going to meet birth in fear.
Right.
So, home birth, we know statistically, is the safest way to have a baby. So, Richard, we have that saying that if they tell you about it and you still use it, they don't have to pay a karmic debt. Yeah. So we know that
Yeah.
all the hospitals are putting all over the newspapers that maternity services in England is not safe. But if women still use it, well, you knew it was bad. So we need to go back a step and just before you get pregnant, get all of your traumas, get into a grounding, know how to cope with yourself. So as soon as because when you're pregnant, you do cognitively think differently. You're slower in thinking. It's meant to. Everything is being sourced to your baby. And when you're working 9 till 5, you're not even connecting to your baby. So then you get a leaflet that says, has your baby moved today? And you'll go, oh, no, it hasn't because I've been at work busy. So then you go to the hospital and then you get your name marked down once. And then if you have more of those, you get induced. And just connect to your baby, connect to your heart space. Think about what you want that is safe for you and your baby. I've had a home birth. It was beautiful. I've had 3 hospital births. One of them was horrific. It was my last birth, and I was a midwife. So that was interesting. It was the most horrific, traumatic birth I've ever had, and I've had 4. So have your home birth. They tell you that statistically you have better outcomes if you birth at home for mums and babies. But people live in the fear. They live
Yes.
in what happens if I can't get to the hospital? What happens? In all the home births I've heard about, most people get to the hospital if they need to.
And it's interesting because 30 years ago, when my wife's were popping out, we were told, "Oh, I don't know about home birth. Oh, no, this is not a good idea. Because, and where we are, I've lived in the same house for 34 years, and the hospital is 5 minutes down the road. I know because I see umpteen more ambulances than I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
More ambulances than there are buses past my house now. You can almost time them, which is very worrying. And but we were being told, oh no, my wife and I went to the classes and we did breastfeeding. I was very good at that, although I wasn't the one supposed to be doing it. But there was this feeling, this sense that no, it's very risky. It's very risky. And yet, go back to the earlier comment. I said, the NHS has only been around for what, 80 years, something like that.
1947.
1947. So just after the Second World War. Prior to that, women managed because we had families, and notice how the family has been split apart and confused and been made to sound, been made to, they're not cohesive, can't rely on anybody anymore, and they're all over the place. And the wisdom of the women that you used to have and your neighbours, because everybody was close together and would pull together as we did, has all been obliterated, and we're now having to try and work out how to rebuild all of this. People were doing it in the most natural way, and yeah, of course there would be problems naturally, but it's interesting that you say that they're sort of saying, oh no, home birth is good, but they must be leaving this question of doubt. Well, but what if gas and air and slitting you open, all of this.
Yeah. I mean, the home birth movement itself is, I mean, how many home births do you think I went to in my whole career of 6.5 years as a registered midwife, and then obviously 4 years as a student midwife? How many home births do you think I attended?
I'm going to say under 10.
Under 10.
That's horrific, isn't it?
That is, when you lose confidence, because when you're seeing all this death and all this bleeding and all this emergency, you then cognitively tell yourself, well, if that happens at home,
yeah,
it wouldn't happen at home, because the ones that are at home are meant to be at home. So it gives you this real warped view of what healthcare and birth looks like. So there are many midwives that don't have children. It's really common. Or they say, I've got to get out because I'll never be able to have a baby because I'm so traumatized.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so statistically, but you are right, what you've touched upon about the villages. So there's no community care anymore. There's no community groups. There are, but they're independent. They're no longer NHS.
No.
What I find interesting is that the NHS is the only place that holds data. They hold all the data. So everything they say we believe. Well, I'm sorry, after COVID, we can never believe anything they've ever said again.
No.
Ever. So for them saying that everybody should birth in a hospital from the 1960s was because of the increased stillbirth rate, which was significantly high. Well, why would we have a population as we have now and need to depopulate if all those babies kept dying? Doesn't make sense.
No.
So in my eyes, it was all just a plan to get people into hospital, to make money, to make all of this big pharma agenda, because how much do you think it is to have a home birth? It's what, £22 an hour for a midwife at home. If you need a second one, you're looking at £50 an hour, because you might need a second midwife for the birth if it happens slowly. In the hospital, to the other extent, it's about £8,000 a cesarean section.
Wow.
So if you think, why would they want you at home?
Yeah, quite. You can see.
So the difference isn't, it's about £304 a night for a bed space. So if you've got an induction that's in for 5 days, you've just made money off them just on the bed. It's absolute money making. Birth is money making. And the minute people see this, and Richard, you won't believe what they're trying to do. There's a campaign, and I'm not even going to give the guy the breath from my lungs, but he wrote this, and he's a doctor. He said, Is it time we see the removal of normalized birth? Yay, I hope so.
Well, yeah, depends what you call normalised birth, isn't it?
Well, but you're a man, and I was like, look, you're a man, you don't get to have that say. I find that discriminatory to me as a woman, like I do with boys that say they give birth. That's ridiculous. So this whole agenda to obliterate normalized birth is happening. There is a place for everything. There's a place for section. There's a place for home birth. There's a place for free birth. There's a place for medicine in all of its sense. But we've tipped the balance now to the point that litigation in maternity services takes up 51% of the overall NHS claims. It's at over £1 billion a year.
Heavens.
So
So,
if we're making all this error in midwifery and it's got 1 in 3 trauma, how are we doing it right? And why would you want to get rid of normal? Because it's not the normal that are having the problems, it's the intervention that's causing the problems and the
right.
psychological damage.
Do you think that we are? Is there an increase in home births now?
What I'm worried about, Richard, and I spoke to Nikita Stark about this and Kemi Johnson, who are both Nikita's a doula and Kemi's a midwife off the register. My worry is this: the hospitals know that they are losing the grip on women. So they are going to scare us by saying it's really, really bad in these hospitals. Those women are then going to filter over into the doula world and the free birthing world. And lots of them might be vaccine injured. And lots of them have got comorbidities, BMI. They've got more autoimmune disease now from the vaccines, more increased deaths. These doulas are going to be picking up a hell of a lot of mess from the hospital. And the hospital will then say, look, it's not safe to free birth, it's not safe to use a doula, and they will bring in a whole new law to obliterate it. They're doing this on purpose. I know what's coming, which is why I will never, ever put my hands on a labouring woman ever again, because they will throw me in jail.
So, I mean, it's a ridiculous thing that you have a natural process, which once you're pregnant, you have to go through unless you terminate. But why, if you don't want to terminate, and that's a completely different issue, but you have to go through it. That if somebody, you're saying that if somebody gives them a hand who isn't a trained professional, that they could end up in prison.
Not if they're a doula, but if you've got a midwifery registration, which I do, and I'm not
Right.
on the register, if I attend a birth now, they
Oh, I
will say
see.
that I should have known better.
Right.
So that's how
Okay.
they get you, because nurses can become midwives after 18 months, but midwives cannot go and be nurses for 18 months. They have to do the whole course again.
So, in the future, I mean, rebuilding this world, I mean, it seems to me the pendulum's gone to a point where there's no return. It's either the pendulum or the car goes to the edge of the cliff and either falls off or it's got to come back.
Yeah.
I believe it's going to come back with renewed vigour, and that it's actually learnt a lot, and it said, we're not putting up with this anymore. Thanks very much. We've managed to free the steering wheel. We can actually turn and have lives again. So in the future, clearly it seems to me that relying on these behemoths of the NHS and all that is not the answer. And now what you said, any nurse or midwife who's got a register, to it should not be involved. And we've spoke about the women of the families in the old days, which clearly was the safest thing that you could possibly have, with the love and affection of your friends, family, and neighbours, who you all cohesively live together. If you are pregnant now and you're thinking of having a home birth, and you could find somebody, which let's face it, perhaps you don't need that very long training that you went through in order to go, there you are, there's your baby. If people started to do that, I mean, from my perspective, and I write about this in my book, funnily enough, because one of the characters, they have a baby and they're sitting there going, the baby's there, the afterbirth is there, the umbilical cord is still connected, and it explains all of that as best as I can. And they're saying, well, we've got this, we're legally, we're supposed to tell the government that we've had a baby? And they go, well, what happens if we don't? And they go through that sort of conversation. But wouldn't it be fantastic if lots and lots of people now started to have babies and didn't tell, so that a generation of people were not in the system?
If I ever had another baby, Richard, that is exactly the road I'd go down. And I think it's really important that we realize that if you are connected to yourself, your source, whatever you want to call it, God within, whatever, if you are connected to yourself and you are pregnant and you're with child and you know there's a baby coming, if you are so connected to yourself, you would allow the process to just evolve and let the universe be. So if you, I know this is hard to hear and people find it strange that I say this concept, but we see death as this horrendous problem. We cannot save everybody. So even if it's your baby that's supposed to be here for 6 months in the uterus and not live, that was its contract. That was its decision. That's what was meant to be because it's happened. So for me, I'm so connected to myself. If I got pregnant now, I would probably have one scan just to see where the placenta was, to check it's out the way and it's safe. And I wouldn't have any involvement with midwifery practice unless it was an acute emergency. I'd birth home. I wouldn't be induced. I wouldn't let anyone touch me. I'd leave the placenta attached until it fell off naturally. I wouldn't register the baby's birth. I wouldn't have vaccines. That I would go right back into my connection to my ancestral self. And as a woman, 100%.
Brilliant. Well, this is, in my opinion, we need more people like you with that thought, because that will build a generation of new people who will be free. It isn't difficult. I'm sorry, it isn't easy, because as soon as you do that, you've said to that child, you can't have pensions, and you can't go to the NHS, and you can't have bank accounts and all that. But
we built a new system, Richard, don't we?
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
This has been an absolutely joyous conversation with fascinating insights. Where can people, do you have a web presence and what have you, and all you do? If people want to book you for a talk or buy your book when it comes out, when is your book coming out?
I'm in the middle of writing it because to start with, I was healing and it didn't feel right. So I've had a little bit more time, and I think now I'm going back to it. I'm bringing a different sense. So yeah, you can find me on X, Victoria, the Uncensored Midwife. I've just put up my first YouTube video about my debt collector court case. I talked through it for, I think, about 25-30 minutes. And I've got a Facebook page, which I've just started, called Victoria Debt to Justice. And I'm just literally blogging what's happened with the courts. It's been a bit slow because I've been doing Jacobs this week. But yeah, that's it really. But Richard, it's been wonderful.
It has been wonderful. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Ladies and gentlemen watching, I hope you got something out of that. Share it wide. And if you know anybody who's pregnant, NHS, public enemy number one, think twice about what you might do, because the future depends on you guys and girls, rather. So until next time, Victoria, thank you for being my guest today. It's been an absolute joy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. I'll be back. I'm just taking a bit of a break because I'm still trying to finish my book from interviews. So I'm trying to concentrate and get the blooming thing done. But there will be a bit about birthing in it, I forget what it's called now. I've written about it. Julia's helping me on that bit, doing the sensitive stuff. You need a woman in your life, don't you? Anyway, I'll be back till then. Thank you for watching from Victoria and I. Bye for now.